everybody, this is Hy from Jacket Hyatt's. Happy 250th anniversary of the United States of America. 250 years of this great nation existing, with my ancestors fighting, bleeding, and dying for this nation from the very beginning, from before the nation was created, all the way to today, way long after the nation's creation, its innovations, and its otherwise lesser talked about struggles, along with its more importantly talked about struggles. So yeah, today is a 250th anniversary special. I just want to come on here and talk a little bit for 9 minutes or so about our great nation that is the United States of America and the 250 years that it has been around. Starting with the fact that let's go ahead and just get back to what I used to do. Talk about flag designs. I would talk about state flag designs, but as I was going through different state flags, I kind of noticed that what I was talking about, at least the flags I would have to talk about, were all kind of the same, just a blue field with a state seal on it. To some people, that's fine and whatever. If you think so, then I guess you just have zero culture in that case. You lack culture. You're the stereotype everybody makes fun of when they think about an American who lacks any kind of culture or anything like that. So yeah, honestly, it's quite sad to think about, because it's like there are so many different other flags out there that could represent a people's state and nation, and they want to subsidize it, so to speak, not subsidize it, substitute it for a lack of cultural identity with a flag that does not inspire anybody, does not influence anybody, that people will look at in dismay and will feel underrepresented, vice to say. Everybody wants to talk about being represented. One of the best ways you can represent yourself is through your nation's flag, and through your state's flag as well, and through your nation's anthems and so forth. So, with that being said, and keeping that in mind, I decided to kind of scrap any video ideas relating to the current iteration of some state flags, such as the flag of Vermont, the flag of New York, and Oklahoma, Nevada, the Dakotas, and even kind of Wyoming. And the reasons why I won't be covering those modern iterations of the flag is because when I do eventually cover those states, which I will, I'm going to be planning to make more of a video of what should have been, what could have been, and something that could better represent the states themselves and the people of the state. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the American flag and a little bit of the history behind it. Starting with the very beginning of the American Revolution. Instead of talking about beforehand, because beforehand it was just New England, I think New Netherlands or New Dutch or whatever, New Dutchy, whatever it's called. I've covered a little bit about some early colonial flags in a previous video, kind of. So yeah, we're starting off with the American Revolution. The reason why we're starting off with the American Revolution is because we're talking about the Betsy Ross design. The Betsy Ross design is well renowned for being a flag design created by a woman named Betsy Ross that was given the request to make such a flag by George Washington, who at the time was not president of the United States, because the United States wasn't a country just yet. It was 1776, during the American Revolution, which was one of the worst years of the American Revolutionary War. The Betsy Ross design itself, though it is a great design and I highly admire it personally, the name is misleading. It doesn't actually belong to Betsy Ross herself. In fact, there is no evidence that Betsy Ross herself actually made the flag, nor that George Washington even talked to Betsy Ross about making an American flag. Maybe George Washington may have went to her for stuff like naval flags, army flags, and so forth, which she was renowned for doing that. Betsy Ross was a real person. She did make flags for the Americans during the Revolutionary War, or should I say the revolutionaries. But she did not make the American flag. The American flag is actually attributed to another man in some document somewhere. I forget the name of the document, and I forget the man's name, but it's a completely different man who was actually attributed to the design of the Betsy Ross flag, and is wrongfully not credited for it. I mean, outside of being really acknowledged for it, and I think he got like a commission pay to do it or something like that, but he didn't get anything else outside of that, which he did demand for more money for more money afterwards. Never got it. Outside of that point case being in that fact, the Betsy Ross flag is as simple as it goes, and honestly, it's really the one flag that I think should have stayed as the American flag. What we have in today's world is the American flag. I think it's stupid, in my opinion. The 50 stars is too much, in my opinion. I think there's nothing wrong with saying that this should go back to being the national flag of America. Not the 250 part, but the rest of the Betsy Ross design should go back to being the nation's flag, for it was the nation's founding flag, and the one flag that the nation is renowned for the most, besides its current iteration. That being said, there were other designs that were created during the Revolutionary War, because any regulations pertaining to the creation and the standardization of the American flag was not really unison, so to speak, and still kind of isn't in today's perspective either. There's a lot of loopholes in the standardization of the American flag, and there was a lot of loopholes back then. You see, because back then people didn't have an American flag. There wasn't such thing as an American flag at all. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the country's name may have just barely been debated as well. But that's a different subject completely. But the flag, as far as the flag itself, you have all sorts of different flag designs, ranging from red and white striped flags with red stars. You have stuff that similar to the Betsy Ross design, but with the 76. I forgot the name of the design off the top of my head. Please forgive me on that one. And even some regimental flags were flown as a American flag, such as the Green Mountaineer Boys flag for Vermont, which that's a subject I will be talking about in the future, and part of the reason why I stopped wanting to talk about those state flags, their current iterations, because I have some complaints about a lot of flags in our nation that do not represent our people to any degree. And when I say our people, I mean the American people. State by state, of course, but overall the American people. With any case being, you had designs such as that. You also had the Sons of Liberty design, which was just alternating red and white stripes. And you also had other designs where the stars were not as uniform, or not as unison, I should probably say. And of course, you had that one design a couple of years down the line in 1812 that is infamous for being a naval flag made out of scraps of the UK flag, or Great Britain's flag, and the American flag, and so forth. But point case being, there was no such thing as, back then there wasn't any such thing as a uniformed American flag, or whatever you want to call it, however you want to get to that point of, there was no such thing as a standardization for it, rather. But there were common designs, and this theme is commonly seen throughout human history in all sorts of different types of nations, such as with the aforementioned Confederacy. I'm about to lose my mind. If I speak too much, I lose my sense, but talking. But anyways, the CSA, the Confederate States of America, even they went through multiple different designs because they couldn't have a unison design either. And they actually started off with the Bonnie Boo flag, which is also a really great flag with some really unique history behind it that most people don't talk about, don't know anything about. And it kind of sucks, admittedly, that people don't talk about, which the Bonnie Boo flag will be covered in a different video as well. As along with the Confederate flags, because the Confederate flags, whilst though they are, recognized as traitor nation flags, they are still American flags. They were made by Americans during a struggle in American history, and it should be recognized. I don't care what your political views are. It should always be recognized, American history, throughout the entirety of its own history, from start to finish, the good, the bad, and the ugly. No matter how bad it is, it should always be talked about, should always be recognized. And I'm not saying you have to agree with it politically, but I am saying you should at least understand and recognize the history behind it and understand the importance of why we have these symbols in our modern day still being used, what they represent, what they actually mean, not what we assume they mean and what we assume they represent, and why it's so important to properly understand these things. These are flags, are symbols of power, so to speak. The different seals that we have for our different states and our countries and our bureaus are symbols of power. They are what define a culture and a nation at its very heart, at its very root. And there's nothing more American than wanting to represent your nation, your people, yourself as a true-blooded American. So that being said, I think that'll do it for this video.